Western civilization is moving closer to a point of irreconcilable, unstable equilibrium, as frighteningly increasing numbers of people trust nothing. Media, academia, and especially the governments are no longer held in high esteem. Regaining trust is often impossible after betrayal. However, transparency is essential to any healing process, and that is the essence of the Don Sullivan Show. Please listen to the team explore, probe, and debate cutting-edge science, technology, and computing. Play ball!
Welcome to a very special episode of the Don Sullivan Show. As you can hear, Don is currently on the road, and you're going to learn more about that very shortly. I'm your co-host, Jersey Steve. First, we want to thank our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by License Fortress, the industry's first and only software asset management firm to offer both a financial and legal guarantee at its highest level of service. Whether it's Oracle, Microsoft, or VMware, License Fortress helps organizations stay compliant, avoid audits, and save money. You can learn more at licensefortress.com. And please support our producer, our wonderful producer, Bill Axt, by visiting axtinc.com. That is AXTINK.com. You can subscribe to his YouTube channel and help support his efforts to create humorous animation, as well as run our website, all while researching a cure for baldness.
Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to the Don Sullivan Show. And today I have to admit to you that I have lied. I told you that there would be 4 episodes of the Climbing Kilimanjaro series, 3 where we summited the great volcano in Tanzania, and 1 in which we did a safari on the west side of the country of Tanzania in the Serengeti National Park, and both were spectacular trips lasting close to a month. But there is a follow-up, and the follow-up name of this particular episode is The Wrath of Kilimanjaro, Fire in the Volcano. And very shortly it will become obvious as to why the team has decided to name this particular episode with such an ominous label. Well, we did pretty well at the end. Everything went extremely well. We developed some tremendous relationships with, as I described earlier, the wonderful people who, 30 or 40 of them, who helped Sean and I up and over the mountains, and then took us on this safari in the Serengeti. But there are certain problems, and I again do blame the Western companies that manage and run and become extremely wealthy off of these tours, including the tour company that I was with, who will go unnamed. But I've seen this all around the country and all in the world. I've seen this all around the country for decades upon decades. This is a particular problem in third world countries. It is a problem in the United States. So to start off with explaining the problem, it's that unless you are at extremely high altitudes and or you are at a source of water that is falling from the sky, in other words, it's raining or it's snowing, we Americans cannot drink the water anywhere else other than filtered water. And it's amazing that this really occurred, or this phenomena occurred, this lack of resistance that we have through our overall immune capabilities has developed over 100 years, 5 generations. Because the settlers that came out west before and after the Civil War, well, they didn't have purifying pills or filters, or they just drank muddy water out of the prairies and the mountains and the mountain streams, and I'm sure some of them got sick. I'm sure many of them died, but many of them made it too. But you can't do that now. Ever since I have been hiking in the mountains out west, that has been one of the more important staples, that you carry your own water with you. You can, of course, drink water out of the taps in the United States, everywhere except Flint, Michigan, I suppose. But you can drink tap water. It's filtered well enough. You cannot drink water out of what appears to be pristine mountain streams, particularly if it's under tree line, but even if it's over tree line. If it's over tree line, there are rats and birds and different types of groundhogs and all kinds of other animals that you generally don't see. And they interact with the water and they leave bacteria. The disease, the condition one gets in the United States is there's a number of them, but the most prevalent one is called Giardia. I've seen it in action, and it's horrible. It is a bacterial explosion that occurs within your body. Now, I'm not quite sure exactly what happened to me, because when you go to countries, and of course I was in Colombia, I've been in last November, we did a Don Sullivan show about that particular Indiana Jones-like expedition, and I've been in Africa many times with Virtualize Africa and other events, and of course I had a heart attack, or I was undergoing a heart attack in 2018 and 19 when I was there in Ghana. And then I wound up with swine flu as well. Lots of fun in the beginning of 2019, but survived it all. Can't drink the water. And I would suggest that you can't drink the water in the high-end hotels that tell you can drink the water. I would suggest that you can't drink the water when they give you water in a bottle that they tell you has been purified. One of the things that was kind of interesting when we first started up the Kilimanjaro Trail, there were a number of different minor conflicts with some of the corporate guides, not with the crew, the general crew, the kitchen staff, the porters, the personal porters, and so on. But there were some disagreements and some debates that were friendly and wound up working themselves out. But one of them was that they told us that they did not use filters, carbon filters, very easy to use. I've used them a lot. The Yellowstone backpacking trip in October, all you do is put a 2-gallon bag in the stream, hang it up off of a tree, costs $50, and once the water filters through that carbon filter, it's good to drink, and we certainly did that for the whole weekend. I've done that many times. There are also purifying pills. The problem with the purifying pills is that A, you have to know that they haven't expired, which I don't know if really matters or not, but at very least you have to be very precise in how that those pills are utilized. You can go to REI or any sporting goods store and they will give you extremely well thought out, detailed advice as to how all that works, but yet it's still something you have to pay attention to greatly. The volume of water has to be exactly what the particular pill or pills allow for, and the amount of time that water has been purified. I would suggest that the temperature that the water is sitting in, because the bacteria still grows in higher temperatures in closed areas, and the bacteria can be more prevalent if you use the same containers day in and day out. So when we were on the way up Kilimanjaro, we were told that there were not filters being used, and I guess I should have known this because I've done this before. They were using purifying pills. And I didn't ask to see which purifying pills. I did not think it was worth any of our time to actually try to investigate any further. I should have done this before I went. This is a very high-end tour. It cost a lot of money. And I have since verbalized my complaints, and they are complaints. But as we went up Kilimanjaro, we were using purified water. Now, the crew there was so tremendously meticulous. I don't think that there was an issue whatsoever with anything in the 12 days that we actually circumvented and hiked up Kilimanjaro. They brought propane boiling tanks with them. They boiled water very precisely. They filled Nalgene bottles for us at night because it was so cold to put in our sleeping tanks. They were wonderful people overall, including the head guides running the whole thing, because there were, again, 50 people and dozens of different tours that were crisscrossing with us at different times and staying in some of the same mega camps, which were basically cities. So I don't think there was an issue there at all. Again, you have to be very careful of it because they are cooking with the water. You are washing your hands with the water. You're potentially brushing your teeth with the water. One of the big traps that people get into are the ice. We didn't have any ice on the way up the mountain, Kilimanjaro that is, but if you do have ice in hotels, you have to ask, are they using purified water? And even if you get an answer, if that answer shows any hesitation whatsoever, it usually means that whoever is answering you isn't really sure. So you have to be very, very careful. You have to be very careful when you're in a shower, not to raise your head and let any of the water get into your mouth. So all of this is very, very real. This has never happened to me before, but what does happen, you'll never forget it. And I'm about to explain it in far too much detail. This is why I call it the Wrath of Kilimanjaro. But the safari was much lower in altitude. We were also told, by the way, not to take the malaria pills on the way up Kilimanjaro, which could cause different nausea issues at altitude, and we were out of the malaria zone and so on. I was a little disconcerted by the fact that we were getting advice from the guides that contradicted the advice of the medical professionals in the United States that told us to take the malaria pills, but I actually thought that was a reasonable piece of advice, and so we followed that. We did start taking malaria pills as soon as we got back down, because again, I was on a 5-day safari with 2 days before the safari, and we stayed at a nice hotel in Ashura, and we went on the safari to Serengeti National Park a little, as we said in one of the previous episodes. We flew out there, got with our guide. They, again, did not have bottled water. They had water that was purified that they would put in bottles. And as I've described to you in the previous episode about the safari, we spent 2 nights. It was 5 days, 4 nights. We spent 2 nights in the huge tent. That's where the elephants made us evacuate, and we had the long drive in the massive floods to the balloon ride that we took. And that was just absolutely spectacular, everything about it. Except, again, we had water that was given to us in a bottle that was not bottled water, and we were told it was safe to drink. Same thing happened the next day. We were in a very, very nice hotel back near Ashura, after the Ngorongoro crater. And we were again told the same thing. Now, you could buy bottled water along the way, but I quite honestly don't remember what we did. I think we just bought 1 bottle of water and then filled it up with the water they gave us, or I don't know. But regardless, it was a pretty significant mistake made. And again, the same principles applied to the food. The last day we were there, we had a very opulent, very nice buffet. But do I know exactly how they were making the ice, even though I asked? No, I don't. Do I know how they were cleaning the lettuce at the salad bar? No, I don't. Salad bars are innate with all kinds of bacterium just from the fact that people would buy them. It's funny, the one thing I thought that would really not survive COVID would be food bars, would be buffets. But that popped back before in late 2021 in Las Vegas, which shocked me. But again, I digress. But you would be sad if I didn't digress at least once or twice during these episodes, especially when I'm not interviewing anybody. But what happened was, as we got back on the plane, went on Ethiopian Airlines, very nice flight from Kilimanjaro Airport to Addis in Ethiopia. Been there many times. The airport is improving tremendously. It's We could talk about the financial reasons for that. I'm very concerned with the Chinese Communist Party influence in Addis, particularly at the airport, because it's a $2 billion airport, but it is becoming very nice. I did what I always do. I bought a watch to commemorate where I was, and we went back. I was sitting in first class the whole way, had meals, had no problems whatsoever. Got back on March 2nd, felt a little woozy. Some of my party got very, very sick, but it went away over a couple of days. With me, it didn't. It kept getting worse and worse and worse. In fact, I took a trip for a visit to Washington, D.C. about a week later, and was extremely exhausted. Thought it was still a holdover from the climb. It wasn't. And then returned to Denver on about March 10th, 11th, and started getting very sick. In the effort to not be squeamish about TMI, diarrhea, which had already set in since March 2nd, was getting worse. And I wasn't throwing up, but I was extremely tired, and I had tremendous leg cramps. As I learned later, the leg cramps were purely from dehydration, which I've never experienced on that level before, which is interesting given the places I've been. But it was extreme, and I honestly that night probably was the first time in my life that I would say I took too many painkillers, because I always take meloxicam, and I did take Advil, which is another NSAID, ibuprofen at the same time, which you're not supposed to, but I was in a lot of pain. I took 2 different dosages of 2 pills each of Tylenol. I did both ibuprofen and Voltaren cream all over my legs and hips. Didn't work at all. And then finally, I took a muscle relaxer. That didn't work at all. And then I took tramadol, all of which you should not be taking together. It's the only night I did it. But I literally couldn't even begin to sleep. All I could do was walk around the whole night, which diminished the problem a little bit. And I will tell you that all the medicines did no good whatsoever. That is the last night that I did any of that. So there's not an issue there. Again, full disclosure on the Don Sullivan Show. Well, unfortunately, things got much, much worse. And the only way I can describe it is if anybody has had the pleasure at 45 years or older of having a colonoscopy, the colonoscopy prep was in no way any worse than what I'm describing here. And it went on and on and on. No blood, no throwing up. But every ounce of water my body could find was being exploded out of it. And we actually, on St. Patrick's Day, had the 17th, we had a trip planned to Arizona. Had to cancel that because I had to go into the emergency room. Well, they kept me in the emergency room for many, many hours, did many, many very unpleasant tests. And, came back, and once again, in this particular hospital, I was told there really wasn't anything they could find test-wise. We had done tests a week before, just in case, but they couldn't find anything. I do have a blockage in my intestines somewhere. The liver enzymes are elevated. They didn't think, and that it's a whole nother subject for a whole nother show. But at first, there was some initial speculation that these could be affecting each other or some crossover, but that was ruled out. And they told me to go home. Literally, they kicked me out of the emergency room. And I was just as bad as ever. Well, the next morning, I got a call from the Jefferson County Health Department. And they explained to me that they used PCR testing. For those of you who are not familiar with PCR testing is the main testing. So standing for polymers or polymer, most people refer to it, chain reaction, is a process of replication. You may remember this from the times of the craziness and the government scam of COVID, in which they would use PCR tests with a certain level of cycles, meaning amplification. The cycles were well higher than was recommended for for anything other than particle testing. And they would find particles of COVID in everyone, and then, of course, anybody who died with COVID as opposed to from COVID would be designated as a COVID death, spreading the many, many trillions of inflation-laden dollars all throughout the Western civilization, particularly the United States. But again, I digress, as usual. So PCR testing, which was created by a scientist named Kary Mullis, who, by the way, was the archenemy of Dr. Fauci for many, many decades. Fauci would never debate him about how this would work. Kary Mullis won a Nobel Prize in 1972. There was an old Nightline dual episode about it back in 1992. It's quite fascinating. He's a fascinating, very down-to-earth guy. And he would tell you that PCR should not generally be used for disease detection. It should be used for DNA analysis. In fact, he did say that hundreds of times. But again, that's not important. What is important is through the PCR testing that was done, the Colorado, or the Jefferson County, Colorado Board of Health called me, an immunologist, to explain that I had contracted the Shigella bacteria, giving me shigellosis, which completely explained all of my symptoms. Not only that, I had E. coli. Now, E. coli, or Shigella, I should say, is an evolutionary result of E. coli, so they're somewhat related. A little bit difficult distinguishing between them, so maybe I didn't have them both separately. It looks like I did. I also had something called Shinovir, which is a form of a norovirus as well, so I was in great shape. So I went and saw my gastroenterologist, who is a wonderfully insightful doctor, and she scheduled me right away for a colonoscopy, as well as another MRI. I've had a CAT scan and I've had an ultrasound on my abdomen to look for whatever this blockage apparently is. The blockage, again, this is a separate subject, but the blockage is being indicated by liver enzymes that are called ALPs and others that are very or highly elevated and have been consistently elevated for many months. And pretty much everybody who's a doctor around me is convinced there's some kind of blockage that they can't see it. So this MRI, which I will have in a couple of days now, will hopefully reveal that. But again, this doctor, the GI doctor, wanted to do these things separately. She wanted to have a colonoscopy on me to see if there's anything else going on other than the Shigella. But fortunately, at about day 26, almost 4 weeks, it started to calm down. And I started to feel better. No more cramps. Diarrhea is at a minimal, if not completely gone. There was never any blood. There was, I was able to walk my dog a little bit, and I wasn't able to hike at all. At one point in the middle of this, I tried to actually lift weights, and quite honestly, it takes a lot to make me emotionally sad, but I have not been so weak since grade school. I couldn't do anything. In fact, it was probably dangerous. I dropped to 145 pounds. My running weight, when I was a near 4-minute miler in the middle 80s, early 80s, was between 143 and 147. And so this was getting dangerous. I should be sitting at 150 to 155, given the amount of activity. The fact that I haven't done anything in a month should counteract some of that. But this morning, again, I'm not saying exactly what day it is, but I'm at 148 still, so I'm pretty stable. I'm trying to eat more, don't want to eat more, but I am trying to get myself to a point where I am going to be allowed to start hiking for real again in the end of the winter here in Colorado in about a week or so. Well, hopefully we'll get back to normal at that point and get ready for the summer adventures. But let me summarize the whole points and the reason for this particular episode. When you go to a third world country, which they all are, outside of Europe and the United States for the most part, or shall I say specifically a place that you are not, as a Westerner, as a United States citizen, quite honestly, you really shouldn't be drinking the water in Europe because it's filtered differently than it is here. Not that it's bad, it's filtered differently. But I do all the time, so we'll put that aside for the moment. But if you go to a country that does not have complete filtering systems for drinking water through their taps, not just where it's labeled potable water, not just where it looks good. I tell you, I saw many of the porters climbing Kilimanjaro drinking water right out of the streams, laughing at us, saying, "You do this, you won't get another half an hour down the trail." And I think they were right. But from here on out, I will be bringing my own filter. They can be bought in miniature size, bicycle pump level size. It takes a little while to produce the water you need that way, because I guess you could jury rig them and hang them up somehow, but that's not the way they work. You can pump them and through the filters and get enough drinking water for a day that way within 20 minutes or so, I guess. So I will be doing that. I recommend that to everyone. I recommend that you be very, very careful of any buffets. Recommend you be very careful. One of the things that I have always been forced to do, I love steak, and I eat steak in the U.S. medium rare, and they rarely cook it medium rare over in Africa. Usually, they don't even know what you're talking about. They'll cook it well or medium well or well. I actually did get a medium rare steak in one of the hotels, which was very good. But again, I'm not sure it really was cooked well enough all the way through. I have no idea. I'm totally speculating. The likelihood it was the water. I guess some other points that I should make: when the Jefferson County Board of Health called, it was an immunologist, and she told me very specifically I didn't have to be quarantined, but I should not prepare food for anyone. Had lots of grandkids running around, and so stayed away from them in terms of any type of sweat or anything else, wrestling-wise. Didn't prepare any food for them, or anybody for that matter. You were expressly prohibited from having any kind of sexual contact. So in other words, no body fluids whatsoever. That's how it transferred. Be extremely diligent about washing your hands 15 times a day, because that is where that bacteria will live, and you can eliminate it by washing your hands enough, which I did, and nobody else around me got sick during this whole period of time. But I would simply say that was the sickest I have been for the longest I have been sick ever. And that is not in any way going to dissuade me from future adventures. And the verbalization, the description of those adventures on the Don Sullivan Show. But I think this is a very worthwhile episode as a warning. One of the things you should always do is visit a travel clinic, or if you say with Kaiser, an HMO, they have their own travel clinics, and talk to the various different doctors at those places who will give you different drugs. I had drugs for traveler's diarrhea, which fortunately I didn't need because this didn't become a problem until I got back to the United States. It is also important, no matter what kind of drugs or vaccines that they give you, you know what you're taking, and that you keep the original labels, because some countries are extremely strict. You go through TSA, or you go through the airport security, they open up your backpacks or they open up your medicine bag and they see something. If they want to cause you an issue at that particular moment, you could be in trouble. So I take clonazepam for some anxiety to sleep, and I usually put it in a smaller bottle, and I really shouldn't do that. That is dangerous. You should have it in all the original bottles with the original prescriptions on those bottles. Some people go as far as to say you should have a note from the doctor explaining it. I think that's a little bit silly, but at least if you have the prescription on the bottle, you can have the doctor's prescription or the doctor's name and not yours if you're a celebrity on the bottle, but I wouldn't even recommend that. Nobody else should be messing around with your prescriptions anyway, even if they are at some kind of security checkpoint. We all remember the ridiculous incident of Rush Limbaugh returning back from Puerto Rico or from Dominican Republic and being stopped at the border security and someone who was hell-bent on embarrassing Rush Limbaugh pulled out a bottle of some kind of sexual dysfunction drug, and the doctor's name, which again was 100% legal, was on the bottle instead of Rush Limbaugh's, and that particular person or somebody else that worked with him leaked it to the press, and so it went on from there. There was no charges filed. There was never any real issue because it was 100% legal. They just made a big deal out of it. So if you're a celebrity, you may be concerned with that a little bit, but again, I wouldn't be personally. Again, my position here is why I'm so open about everything that is going on with my my body that seems to be at this moment not only in very, very good overall physical fitness level, but also got lots of things wrong with me. I compare myself to an old Ferrari that can really get up and move and go fast and go for a while, but needs a lot of replacement parts, and they're all expensive. So maybe at this point an old Lexus would make more sense, but I'll take that too. But I wanted to just finish up by saying, really be prepared, use extreme caution, bring filters, bring the drugs or the prescriptions that you need with the prescription packages, with the original packages with the prescription labels affixed to them, and you will avoid that 1 in 1,000 or 1,000,000 type of event that might occur, which would be mostly could potentially be much worse than me simply getting sick. Now, what I will also add before I leave is the level of sickness that I had was not trivial. It is, I would say, certainly possible that it was not survivable for somebody who was 63 years old and maybe in horrific shape, who just overall who had a lot of comorbidities, which I do, but I'm also in good shape. Again, the likelihood is I picked it up in the Serengeti, which is only about 1,000-foot altitude, as opposed to on the mountain, which we pretty much went the entire 10 of the 12 days at 13, anywhere over 10,000 feet, and then up to 19,000 feet. So I'd be very, very careful and very diligent and follow all the instructions, or you could find yourself having a very ruined vacation. So we're going to have Dr. Theo on to talk about some of what I just talked about, and give a little bit more detail analysis on what exactly happened to me and what exactly you should do about it. So until next segment, and we have Dr. Theo and Stephen will be back on. See ya.
Hello again, folks, and welcome back to this final segment of the Don Sullivan Show, the fifth and the bonus episode of Climbing Kilimanjaro. Wasn't a bonus for me, but it's a bonus episode nonetheless. And we have our go-to medical specialist, Dr. Theo Hodge, on the call to answer the questions about what the hell happened to me and what the wrath of Kilimanjaro did to me, the fire in the volcano. So, Theo, say hello and tell me what the hell you think happened to me for 23 days.
Well, hi, I'm Theo Hodge. I'm from Washington, D.C., and as always, it is a pleasure to be here on the Don Sullivan Show. What happened to you? You got traveler's diarrhea, buddy, okay? Bottom line is oral fecal. What do I mean by that? You either had food contaminated with sewage or the water you were drinking was contaminated with sewage. So when that happens, you end up with some nasty organisms. Nasty. And as I recall, one of them was Shigella.
E. coli.
I've never heard of that one. I've heard of E. coli, but with
they're very related.
Yeah.
They're related genetically, but yeah.
Yeah, they are related. And, here's the deal. Shigella typically is pretty self-limited. I mean, its average duration is about 7 days.
Yeah, I exceeded that. I exceeded expectations.
You did.
you always do.
there's some very common Shigellas that I see in my practice. I mean, we see Shigella here in the States. However, Shigella has actually emerged as one of those organisms that has a lot of drug resistance, and it can cause some very severe diarrhea. In fact, globally, antibiotic-resistant Shigella infections are the most common cause of moderate to severe diarrhea in children.
Wow.
That's one of the things that you have. It's usually with children. But
is that common over here, Theo?
It's common, but the burden of disease due to Shigella globally, as a result of all of this antibiotic-resistant Shigella was added to the World Health Organization bacterial priority pathogens list in 2024. Yeah, because it's just that bad. In Asia and Africa, 65 to 85% of isolates are resistant to multiple antibiotics. And actually, Don, you are the classic. I would have been concerned if when you came in with your diarrhea, because I see diarrhea all the time. But once I collected your travel history, I would have immediately been concerned about extensively drug-resistant strains, because that's typically, it is a high risk that you will have one of those types of resistant Shigella if you picked it up in Asia or Africa.
Would have been Tanzania.
So you dodged a bullet there. Yeah.
Well,
it could have been worse, in other words.
And
it's a high risk factor that you have an antibiotic resistant Shigella. So in terms of treating it, you would treat it the same way, but if you didn't have any, and usually within 2 days of starting medication, you would notice a difference. If you didn't, that's where I would be concerned about, hey, I need to think of other antibiotics because of where you got your Shigella. So, the way you presented, because you were like essentially 2 weeks of diarrhea and you were wasting away. And I'm like,
it was over 3 weeks. And that, the biggest problem
initially you blamed chicken from a certain grocery store.
Yeah, I thought that it was maybe something we ate when we got home, because I had no trouble on a 30-hour flight on the way home. But, once we got home.
Well, imagine that would be awful, though. I mean, at least it didn't show up until you were off the airplane. Imagine like being on the can on the airplane the whole time.
And usually when Shigella makes people sick, which is what I was asking you when you were telling me this, I'm like, do you have bloody stools? Do you have bloody stools? Do you have bloody stools? Because typically it will cause dysentery, which is usually fever and mucus and blood. All of that is, those symptoms of what we will define as dysentery, and that
really
immediately calls for antibiotic immediately because people
that's
dehydrate.
An old school. That's an old school. I never knew what that was exactly. So that's a condition or a specific. That's not a specific virus. It's a condition.
Yeah, it's a condition. So there are many things that can cause dysentery, but certainly Shigella is one of them. In fact, and when you're doing your infectious disease fellowship, that's one of there's like Shigella, Salmonella, Campylobacter. Those are the types or names of bacteria that typically will cause bloody stools. So for me as a healthcare provider, the instant you say bloody stools and I'm having diarrhea, I immediately, Shigella is number one. That's the first organism I think of. And then Campylobacter and maybe Salmonella, but it's usually Shigella is the one that's causing bloody stools. Or mucusy. They can be like snot pouring from your bottom. That's another symptom of dysentery. So, but usually the three go together. It's mucoid type or snot. Just imagine snot pouring out of your bottom with blood, and you're having a fever. Those are the typical three things that pop up.
It's very unpleasant.
No, I never had a fever.
Yeah.
You never had a fever? That's good.
I never had a fever.
Did you have bloody stool? You didn't have blood either, did you?
No, I never had blood. I never had fever. What I had, which is the worst part of it at all, is the cramps. I was obviously extremely dehydrated, and for about 5 days, the cramps in my hips and my legs were profound. And I took every pain medication that I had, and none of them touched it. So,
Yeah. Yeah, that's because of your electrolyte depletion. So you lose lots of potassium and you sodium, and people, that's when we talk about symptomatic treatment. I usually will have you do Pedialyte because Pedialyte has all your.
Yeah, I started taking that as well as liquid IV.
Yeah. I mean, because the other common thing we use is Gatorade, but in your case, because of your known diabetes, I would not have wanted you to use Gatorade because it's just full of sugar. As is Pedialyte is not as full of sugar although I think you can actually get Gatorade such that you don't have all that sugar in it. I think there's like a Gatorade Zero or something like that.
Yeah, they have a sugar-free version. It tastes a little funky, but it's doable.
Yeah, and that would have been a good thing to do. Now, sometimes it gets so bad that when people have this kind of diarrhea, they get dizzy, they get lightheaded. And that's one of the first questions I ask. So a patient comes in with diarrhea, you do a travel history so you have some idea, if you had gotten this, let's say in Nepal, Don, I would have thought of the parasite Cyclospora, which we really usually don't see here in the States. But if you're in certain places, then yeah. Or if you were in St. Petersburg in Russia and you came back with diarrhea, I would think of Giardia. Now, Giardia is all over the place, but I would definitely think of it.
Giardia is very prevalent in Colorado, obviously in the streams.
So it's and that is a parasite. You had bacteria. You had a pathogen bacteria. E. coli can produce what's called a Shigella toxin. So it acts very much like Shigella. It doesn't usually have the profound symptoms that Shigella can have. It is treated by the same antibiotics. So had you come in with this 3 weeks history of diarrhea and wasting away in front of me because you lost how much weight while all this was going on? You lose at least like 10.
I'm down to my running weight.
You tell me, how much did you lose over that 3 weeks?
About 10 pounds. So, I mean, I was very fit to begin with. So I'm at 145.
10 pounds
right
over
now.
3 weeks is pretty quick, though, right?
Especially when I had nothing to lose. So.
All right, we got to get you on TV. Infomercials. Lose 10 pounds in 3 weeks. The Don Sullivan diet. You just need that special water from Tanzania. We'll sell it as seen on TV.
I don't know why countries
style.
do. Why do countries do biological weapons research? All they got to do is collect the water.
Exactly.
So, Theo, here's my advice to the vast audience of the Don Sullivan Show, in great earnest, from now a lot of non-direct experience and direct experience, that for the most part, when you go on these tours, the American tour companies are just making money, but the people that you're working with in these places are of great hospitality, and they are doing what they do, and they don't really totally know what they, and particularly in Africa, it's not true in Europe, but particularly in Africa, they don't hand out bottled water. They hand out water that's been purified in bottles, but they're using pills. They're not even using filters. And damn USAID could actually, if they were worth anything, could actually send these $25 filters all over Africa and solve this problem. But what I think my advice to everyone who's listening is at this point you can get a bicycle pump level filter yourself that costs like $25 and bring it with you, and any water at all you plan on drinking. And now you can't deal with buffets and lettuce and food being prepared for you, and the worst, of course, is ice, because you have any idea where any of that came from. So you still might get caught, but and they can drink it. the guides were laughing. They could drink the water right out of the streams. Obviously,
Yeah, they're like immune to it.
Yeah.
Why don't they make like a pill you can take that just? Why isn't there a prep for that kind of water when you travel?
There is, Stephen.
You know
That's the point. They use purifying pills, but there has to be
a pill that you take to avoid it.
It's maybe they could, but I mean, once it gets inside you and starts reproducing, it's gonna look. All I can describe is that my entire body was rebelling against me, and it really was like colonoscopy prep. It's the only thing that
I can't imagine doing that for 2 weeks, Don. That was awful enough for like a night.
Yeah, it is.
I'm really surprised your doctors did not empirically put you on antibiotics after having diarrhea of that length of time and losing weight. I mean, you get a stool sample and you play guess your best until you have the stool samples come back to further guide your therapy. So that's typically the way I do it.
So it was March 18th. This started on March 2nd. It was March 18th in the emergency room that they had me start taking some antibiotics. And then it was the next day that the Colorado Board of Health called me and told me the good news.
It had been, by that time, like 3 weeks of antibiotics. 3 weeks of diarrhea. So that's a long time.
When did you contact your doctor? Did you ride it out a little bit on your own?
No, I didn't actually. I called back and forth on a number. Again, I got a concierge doctor, so we went back and forth on a couple of occasions. Unfortunately, as you both know, there are other things that are a little bit more pressing. They wanted to get me they think there's a blockage in my intestines, and they wanted to, as soon as I got back from Africa, try to examine that. They did a CAT scan and nothing came up. I'm doing an MRI this coming weekend. So they were more focused on that, I guess. But
and diarrhea.
It's a partial blockage, I'm guessing, or something like that, or?
Well, the liver enzymes, ALPs, Theo, are showing that. But the CAT scan and the ultrasound have come back negative, so they're doing an MRI. So I don't have any pain that way, but they're very concerned about that. So is my brother now, and he wasn't for a long time because these enzymes.
Question though, can you, if you have a blockage in your intestines, can you still go?
Yeah, you can have post-obstructive diarrhea. That's where the stool is getting past the obstruction. So if you actually had an obstruction in your bowel.
And that's what the problem was here. It's why I went to the gastro. It's why I went to because they knew these things were all going on simultaneously. So it's good that they're separate and they can deal with them separate. But they weren't sure, for like around St. Patrick's Day. So.
Well, they did go ahead and they did get, there is, we were talking about diarrhea and I was trying to play which one do you have, they have these PCRs. That's where they look at.
That's what they did. They did a PCR test.
Yeah.
The Colorado Board of Health.
So it's helpful. The problem with PCR, though, is let's say you did have a drug-resistant Shigella. Well, that's not going to help me. I know you have Shigella, but I don't know which antibiotics are going to take care of the Shigella. That's where you would actually have to have a stool culture where you actually grow out the organism and then drop antibiotics into it to see which antibiotic is going to kill the Shigella. Therein lies the problem when you're doing a PCR and you run up against an organism that doesn't respond to the therapy that usually will take care of the organism. In your case, it looks like that's not a problem, but that's what happens when you just use PCR rather than culturing the organism. Interestingly enough, in the worst possible case scenario, Shigella can cause obstruction and colonic problems. That's why if we know you have Shigella, we would never give you something like Imodium. Imodium typically slows down.
That's one of the things they told me. They told me, do not take Imodium. Yeah.
Yeah, that will much more likely lead to some of the complications that we see with these types of organisms. So I am glad that they did not do that. And so that at least in terms of your medical management as we go through, the medical conditions that you have, this one is reversible and curable. Yay. So we'll work on others, but at least this is one less problem, as they say.
All right, Theo. Any more advice for the audience here of the show in regards to avoiding the fire from the volcano? As I was, despite the fact that I summited pretty well and had great 5 shows over it, now 5. What advice do you have?
Oh, bottled water, wash your hands. And, there are those tablets that you can take to decontaminate water. So if you have the choice of doing it yourself, do it yourself rather than to rely on anybody else. That's what I'm telling people now. Bring your own little mini pump for $25. And
if you're not doing it yourself, if somebody else screws up, it's literally your ass.
And on that note, Stephen. And on that note, folks, we're going to end this particular episode that no matter where I am, no matter what kind of wise-ass statements Stephen's making, no matter which mountains I'm on top of, or no matter which bathrooms I am frequenting, no matter what, remember one thing, that all at-bats are situational.